We are here for a quick discussion on budget. As we all know that budget has been presented on 1st of Feb by the Union Finance Minister for the financial year 2025-2026. It was presented under the Article 112 of the Indian Constitution. Interestingly, the term budget is not mentioned in the Constitution. So what is mentioned? Annual financial statement word is mentioned. So what does the statement consist of? It consisted of estimated receipts and expenditure of the government. Estimated receipts are what? Estimated receipts are the statement from where we are getting money and how much. Similarly, in the estimated expenditure, how much we are going to spend and where in a financial year. In India, financial year start from 1st of April and it ends on 31st of March. So for 2025-2026, it will start on 1st April 2025 and it will end on 31st March 2026. It is prepared by Department of Economic Affairs in the Minister of Finance. It consists of two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A deals with the macroeconomic part, consisting with various schemes and the priorities of the government announced and the allocations made to several sectors like agriculture, health, education, etc. And the part B deals with finance bill, like which contains taxation proposals like income tax revision and income tax, like indirect tax, GST. Now there are few terms which was mentioned in this year budget, like basic custom duty, tax deducted at source, tax collected at source. So custom duty is imposed on goods when they are transported across international borders. They are levied under the Custom Act 1962. They are mainly imposed to safeguard our domestic industry and to see the movement of goods. Tax deducted at source. It is the tax deducted on the payment made by the company to an individual in case amount exceeds a certain limit. Like for example of salary. If a person working in MNC receives a salary, the company deducts 10% TDS. Now to get this back, they have to file ITR and report whole income, resulting into tax compliance. Similarly, tax collected at source. In this, the tax is collected by the sellers while selling something to buyer, mainly high value cars, jewelries. In these two things, etc., the tax is collected at the source. And now you have to report in income tax return, ultimately leading to compliance and curb on black money. Now there are different types of budget deficit. Now before going into budget deficit, there are two types of budget: revenue and capital. Revenue deals with revenue expenditure and revenue receipts, like taxes, fees are the revenue receipts, and pension, salaries are the expenditure. Now capital, loans, assets, investment, these comes into the capital and these comes into the revenue. Mainly the operational cost comes under the revenue part and the asset parts and the liability parts come into the capital budget. Now there are different types of deficits. Why deficits in budget? Just like if you see a student having less financial resources take loan, goes into educational institute, they build better human resource, more skillful, and then they pay back the loan to the bank. In the process, what is happening? A asset is creating. A asset has been created. Human resource has been developed. So it will lead to the development. So to achieve development, we generally spend more than what we are earning. This is our goal. So there are different kind of deficits, and we will see what this signifies and what are the trends. That is more important. So in revenue deficit, the revenue expenditure exceeds the revenue receipts. Similarly, fiscal deficit is the total expenditure get reduced by the total receipts except for the borrowing part. We will not considering the borrowing part because it will lead to the repayment of that segment. Now, the primary deficit is the fiscal deficit get reduced by the payment of interest. Like we have to pay the interest on the previous loans which we have taken. So, fiscal deficit minus the payment of interest will result into primary deficit. Now, the effective revenue deficit. In effective revenue deficit, what is happening that in case of revenue deficit, there are some kind of revenue expenditure which goes for the creation of capital asset. So in that case, effective revenue deficit will be revenue deficit minus grants for capital creation. And the monetized deficit is nothing but when fiscal deficit is later covered through borrowing from RBI. It is monetized fiscal deficit. So budget deficit, as we have already discussed, total expenditure minus total receipts. Revenue deficit is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. Fiscal deficit is total expenditure minus total income. What is total income? Revenue receipt plus non-debt creating capital receipt. What are non-debt creating capital receipts? Like uh, auction of, let's say, auction of auction of a coal block, or you can say spectrum, etc. And it is also the primary deficit is fiscal deficit minus interest payment. Now, these are the terms which are easily understanding through these terminology. So fiscal deficit already we have done, revenue deficit we have done, effective revenue deficit is done, primary deficit is also done, effective capital expenditure means it is the sum of capital expenditure and grant in aid for the creation of capital asset. So all these important terms has been covered. Now moving up to the trends. This is most important. So for robust economy, what we should do? There should be decrease in deficits and increase in tax collection so that growth process can become sustainable. So this is the general trend. What should happen? So as we can see, that fiscal deficit has been decreasing as per the target. Similarly, revenue deficit is decreasing, as we can see regularly. The primary deficit is also decreasing, and the effective revenue deficit is also decreasing. So we are having less deficits year on year. Similarly, when we see that in case of receipts and the expenditure, in the revenue, it is increasing. There was decrement here, but again it increased. Similarly, capital also, there was decrement here, but again increased. Similarly, expenditure, revenue is increasing. There was decrement, then increment, and there is again increment. So these are the capital expenditure. So which expenditure is better, revenue or capital? Take it like example, like you get a money, 100 rupee money from some of your relative, and you go into some kind of restaurant and eat, and it is now gone. Now you have invested, if you would have invested this 100 rupees in a stock market or in FD or getting you a better course to make yourself better equipped. So this is the capital expenditure. You will get return in the later stage. So actually capital expenditure is good when compared to revenue expenditure, but again revenue expenditure should be important to run the government. These are the operational costs like pension, salary, and all that. So this is very important, revenue expenditures. Now, as we have already talked about, that part A covers the macroeconomic part. So these are some of the broad principles which were mentioned as a part of Viksit Bharat, means developed India by 2047. So what are the major broad principles followed? Zero poverty, 100% good quality school education, access to high quality, affordable and comprehensive health care, 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment, 70% women in economic activities, and farmers making our country the food basket of the world. So these are the six broad principles. And also the focus on poor, the Garib, youth, farmer called as Andata, and women Nari. The Union Budget highlights that agriculture, MSME, investment and export are the engines in the journey of Viksit Bharat, using reform as fuel guided by a spirit of inclusivity. And in part B, which we have talked about the tax reform, as we already know that up to 12 lakh per annum, it has been exempted. And if we take a standard deduction of 75,000, then a total of 12.75 lakh per annum will pay nil tax. And this is the new taxation slab, like 0 to 4 lakh, nil, 0 to 8, 5%, 8 to 12, 10%, 12 to 60, 15%, and similarly. But what is important to understand, up to 12.75 with standard deduction, you have to pay nil tax. But if the amount exceed, means let's say 14 lakh, okay, so you have to pay Up to 4 lakh, 0. Then 0 to 4, you have to pay 0%. Then next 4 to 8, you have to pay 5%. Means up to next, you have to pay 20,000. Similarly, you have to pay the taxes. Means you are not exempted from this. Similarly, from 8 to 12, next 4, you have to pay the 10% tax and it will come out to 40%, pay 40K. Then from 12 to 14, on that 2 lakh, you have to pay the 15%. So it will be coming around 30K. So a total of 90K tax one has to pay if they are earning around 40 LPA. Now, these are the important data from where we are getting the money. So maximum we are getting from income tax, that is 22%. Okay, just look into the important highlight. These are the borrowing and liability, 24. Okay, and then you will be getting goods GST one, and then the corporation tax, that is 70. These are the custom 4, union excise 5, non-tax receipts like fees, stamp duty, and non-debt capital receipt, which I have already discussed. Now here we are going to how we are going to spend that money which we are getting it. So there is huge chunk going into the interest payment, shares of tax and duties 22, then major subsidies 6, defense 8, finance commission and other transfers 8, central sponsored scheme 8, other expenditure 8, pension 4, and central sector scheme 16. Okay, just look into the trends, which is the maximum one. So if we will look into this is the maximum, we are going to borrowing and liabilities, that is the first. Then the second will be the income tax 2, then 3 will be the GST, then 4 corporation tax. Just remember these top 4, and mainly income tax is more than the corporation tax. Important point is this one. And even income tax is more than the GST. And similarly here interest payment is 20, means 20%. Then similarly how much share going to the state is 22. Then pension is 4%, defense 8, major subsidy is 6. This much will be important. Now look into the deficit trends. How deficit actually increased or decreased in the recent year. So as I have already talked about, that deficit should be on the decreasing side and taxation should be increasing side. So it is decreasing. It is now fiscal deficit is around 4.4. It is budget estimated. Revenue deficit 1.5. Effective revenue deficit 0. No, 0.3, and primary deficit is zero point 0.8. Now the sources of deficit financing, how we are financing that deficit. So security against a small saving, short-term borrowing, then market borrowing and others. So just look into these terms. Okay, how we are financing the deficit. So these mainly market borrowing, short-term borrowing, and security against the small saving. Now trend in tax receipts. So how much we are getting and from where? So direct taxation, indirect taxation, and gross. So indirect taxation it is 7.1%, and in indirect it is 4.9%, and total it come up 12% of the GDP. and it is also having an increasing trend, like from 2020 to 2023. Before that, it was 11.5. So there was a decrement for 1 year, but then it is steadily increasing. And how the net receipts of the center means how much they are getting and from where. The non-tax revenue, non-debt capital receipts, and center net tax revenue. So it is increasing each year. You can see there has been increasing trend, and increasing trend. So just look into the trend. No need to learn all the data. Similarly, the composition of the expenditure, how much they are expending and from which sector and from where, it is also increasing. Now, total expenditure, revenue account, and effective capital expenditure. So you can see that effective capital expenditure is increasing. There was a decrement in last year, then again it increased. So revenue expenditure is decreased. So what we have talked about, that revenue expenditure, which is more like should be decreasing, and capital expenditure should be increasing in nature for a good economy. And this is what is what we can see, that at here the revenue account is decreasing regularly, but the effective capital part is increasing, and it should be increasing. If you see in the 10-year or 9-year gap, from 2.9 it is 4.3, and here also you can see from 2.8 to 11.2, and in total from 4.5% of GDP to 15.5. Sorry, it is in lakh crore, not the percentage of GDP. And then the capital expenditure as a part of GDP. So it was increased almost. There was a dip, but there is a general rising trend. So capital expenditure is rising and revenue expenditure is decreasing. So we can say that it is in a positive mode. Similarly, total transfer to state and UTs. It is also have a increasing trend. Now, how much and from where the composition of the transfer to the states and the UTs, like from the finance commission per year, then there has been increase. So there has been devolution to the states and the UTs in a much larger quantity. Now, these are the subparts. Like this is the capital receipt. So what were the parts of the capital receipts? Like non-debt capital receipt. Then the debt capital receipt consists of a small saving, state provident fund and others, and the market loans. And similarly, gross tax revenue, this shows the revenue part, the GST, Union Excise Duty, taxes on income, corporation tax, transfer to NDR, means National Disaster Relief Fund, and it is actually spending. And 14.22 is the state share of the taxes. And here the non-tax revenue, the interest receipt part, dividend and the profit and other. So this is the total budget size. And how we are spending this much? Like center sector scheme, general services, economic services, subsidies. And in subsidies, one can see that food subsidy is the largest one, then the fertilizer, and then the petroleum. So if someone asks, so food number one, number two, fertilizer, then number three is petroleum. Similarly, we can see that other scheme transfer to the state, then finance commission, and then other transfer, then establishment expenditure like salary, pension, and other. One can see that pension is more than salary, interest payment, autonomous bodies, and others. Now we will look into the key features of the budget. So, journey of the development, like as I have already mentioned, what are the engines of the development, like agriculture, MSME, micro, small, medium enterprises, then the investment, and then the exports. So, fuel, what are the fuel for this development? The reforms, guiding spirit will be inclusivity, and what is the destination? Is the Viksit Bharat. A country is not just its soil, a country is its people. So, it is people what makes a country. So, human resource, and also we are going through demographic transition, like 50 to 59 years, population exceeds more than 60%. Now, what are the aspirations of the Viksit Bharat? Accelerated growth, secure inclusive development, enhance the spending power of rising middle class, then private sector investment should increase and uphold the household sentiments. Now, we will look into the important part, like so that the relevant portion will be marked. So, development measure for the Garib, youth, Andata, and Nari, what we have already seen. So, for the agricultural growth and building rural prosperity, government has enhanced the credit through Kisan Credit Card. The limit has been increased. Now, similarly, developing agri-district program, cotton productivity has been mission has launched for it. Now, Makhana board has been to be set up in Bihar. Makhana is known as one of the superfoods and the high yielding seeds also. In pulses, we have increased, we have launched Atmanirbharta and India Post for catalyst for rural economy, like for DBT, cash out, EMI pickup, for micro enterprises, insurance, and all that. Now, similarly, the credit cards for micro enterprises. So, we have to increase the credit growth. So, there has been increase in that one. Now, similarly, one of the most important thing, because as MSME is the growth engine, they are very important because they constitute around one of the largest sector of employment and also around 40 to 50% contribution to export. Okay, so here is the credit guarantee cover, which has been increased for MSME current 5 to 10 crore, and for the startup 10 to 20 crore, and the exporter MSME term loan up to 20 crores. Now the classification has been changed for MSME. What has been changed? Earlier micro enterprises, they have been defined on the terms of investment and turnover. What is investment and turnover? Turnover is actually just how much they are doing business overall, and investment, how much they are invested. So, micro enterprises, earlier it was 1, now it has been 2.5, and turnover from 5 to 10. So, small enterprises, earlier it was 10, now it is 25. For turnover, it was earlier 50, now it has been 100. For medium, earlier it was 50, now it is 125, and in case of turnover, earlier it was 250 and now it is 500. So investing in people, economy and innovation. Nothing much to be learned, just go through it and see anything like increasing of capacity in IITs, and daycare cancer centers in all district hospitals, Atal Thinker Lab, expansion of medical education, like 10,000 additional seat with goal of adding 75,000 in next 5 years. Okay, and we have loan from the bank for the building support. So Nidhi Yojana. And nothing much support to infrastructure, then Jal Jeevan Mission and all that asset monetization program. These are just the flagship schemes which are mentioned in the budget. Nothing much in it. Just go through it, looking into what are the famous like Gene Bank for Crop, Gen Plus, PM Research Fellowship, National Geospatial Mission for Gati Shakti and all that. Promoting export, we have targeted to promote export. Just look into these words here. How we are going to promote the export, Bharat Trade Net being part for global supply chain, national framework for GCC, warehousing facility for air cargo, then export promotion mission, the FDI limit for the insurance sector will be raised from 74 to 100%. Means foreign direct investment will allowed. Then the tax reforms has been brought, regulatory reform. There will be a new income tax bill. New income tax bill will be there. Regulatory reform means also there has been Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 to decriminalize more than 100 provisions. Those provisions we don't need today as criminal offenses. The indirect tax proposals means they have rationalized ease of doing business to achieve ease of doing business, removal of seven tariff rates, applying not more than one cess or surcharge. So what is cess and surcharge? So these are tax on tax, okay, and these are not shared by the center to the states in devolution. So cess is for a particular purpose, like Swachh Bharat cess one can see in the bill of any outlet. And surcharge is actually can be spent for any purpose, but cess can be spent on only that particular purpose due, for which it has been imposed. Equivalence will maintain effective duty in most of the item and lower cess on certain item. Now, sector specific also make in India exemption open for the LCD loans and all that for increase the manufacturing. Duty free input for handicraft and leather sectors and also shipbreaking, extension of time, export. These are the addition of 36 life-saving drugs in the exempted list, 6 medicine in 5% duty list, and 37 medicine and 30 new patient assistance program is exempted list. So medicine for rare diseases, cancer, severe, these are for the targeting human. Now direct tax proposal, as I have already discussed, up to 12 lakh and with deduction 12.75 lakh per annum has been exempted. So this is the break even. And now the tax deduction limit, the TDS for senior citizen has been doubled from 50,000 to 1 lakh. And annual limit for the TDS on rent has been increased from 2.4 lakh to 6 lakh. No need to go into the data, but at least understand the terminology. Increasing voluntary compliance means you have to update the returns from current limit of 2 years to 4 years. You can file from 2 to 4 years. Reducing the compliance burden for the charitable trust registration from 5 to 10 years. Taxpayer allowed to claim the annual value of self-occupied previously zero without any condition. Earlier, condition was attached. Now, employment. To increase the employment, these are the tax certainty for the electronics manufacturing. Tonnage tax, actually a tax which is paid in terms of how much ton of weight is carried by the vessel. Okay, these are mainly imposed in the shipping sector. Then extension of incorporation by 5 years of startup. They have been given specific benefits, and then the certain taxation to category and category of alternative investment funds. Now this is again same thing from where the rupee come and from where rupee goes, as we can all see that borrowing another is 24%, then 22%. Here GST is 18, corporation 17. So these are important. Goes to where again 22% to state share, interest payment 20%, major subsidies 6%, central responsibility scheme 8%, finance 8%, then center sector scheme 16%, pension 4%, and all that. So you have to understand these. Now this is important that revenue receipts, these are also almost increasing trend, and capital receipts are in decreasing. It should have been increasing for better economic structure. Then the expenditure, effective capital expenditure, it is like this. It should have been like this. Revenue expenditure, ideally it should decrease, but it is increasing in nature. So robust economic foundation here. The deficit trends, like fiscal deficit is decreasing, revenue deficit is decreasing, effective revenue deficit is decreasing, and primary deficit is decreasing. So this is good. Total transfer to state is also increasing, and here net central tax revenue, total tax revenue, non-debt capital receipt. So non-debt capital receipt, I have already given example like allocation of coal blocks, or you can say spectrum allocation. So it was decrement for the last 2 years. Now it has been in the budget, it is shown like increasing. So in which sector it has been expenditure of the major items? So defense largest, then the rural development, then home affairs, education, health, urban development, IT, energy, commercial, social welfare, scientific department. So one can actually compare. If you see that one should compare the defense expenditure is more than the health, education, and scientific department. You can compare that social welfare. Even by combining these, I think defense is more than these four important sectors. So one can compare it. So thank you. Any doubt you can put into the comment section. I will try to explain it. Thank you for watching this video. Any doubt, any comment, any feedback, most welcome in the comment section. Thank you.